So my second shot is going to be a camera cut, right? I'm going to cut in to another angle, and we're going to take a look from a new point of view or a new perspective. So I'm going to change my cut so that I'm looking at the front of my friend here, kind of from the rock's point of view. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my second sequence. And once again, when we move to the beginning, so let me go to the front here, we're back where we were when we started our other sequence in the same way. So I have my cine camera, I have my actor, it's set in a given position where it's going to start. If I need to move that to a new position, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to set my timeline to the start. I'm going to select my camera actor. Again, I can select it here. It's easier than finding it over here. But I have to right click over here. With my camera actor selected, I'm going to work the same way as before. I can right click on it. I can choose to pilot the cine camera. And I'm going to pilot my camera in. So I've moved my camera to where I want it to be at that point, right? And then I'm going to create my keyframe. So down my camera actor, transform, let's create the keyframe. But I've noticed one problem. Narbash has returned to his original location. Why? Because when we play our cutscenes don't always want to change the gameplay. If you had an NPC cutscene where, say, we walked into a store and the shopkeeper was behind the counter and he was to walk out and show you a bunch of items and the game would start up again, in that situation, we would want the NPC shopkeeper to be back behind the counter where he's supposed to be. We don't want him to be where the cutscene caused him to end up. We would want any items he showed you to be back on the shelves. We don't want them to be moved somewhere. Not all of the changes that we make in a cutscene do we want to be permanent. But in this case, I really did want Narbash's movement to be permanent. I want it to be something that sticks around when that cutscene is over. So even though I've piloted that cinema actor and I've moved it and got it set up, I'm going to need to go back to my first cutscene to make sure that Narbash is going to retain his information. And with this cutscene selected, I'm going to select Narbash. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to right click on this transform track that is the one that we set our keyframes and made changes for. When I right click, I can go up to properties, and one of my options is when finished. And this is the decision of what should happen with this timeline when the cutscene is over. Right now, it's set to project default. We could go up to our edit project settings and set it so that the default is to store or retain all of these changes. But I don't want to necessarily do that for every single object. I'm going to tell them one at a time. So the object that I want to stay is I do want Narbash to keep his new position. So when finished, I'm going to keep my state. He's going to stay the same. With that finished, right, I can go back to my cutscene master, go to my new cutscene, and we'll see, look, now he's in the new position because he stayed in that setup. It looks like my camera moved a little bit. I don't know what happened there. So I'm going to select my camera actor again. Let me go ahead and pilot it again. So I need to select my camera actor, right click, pilot. I'm going to back up a little, give me a little better view of Narbash. I want to see all of him from that point of view. I will go ahead and reset my keyframe. So I'm going to add this new keyframe to reset those values. And then now he's not going to play his idle animation anymore, so I'm going to need to add a new animation to him. To do that, I need to add him to this sequence. Right now, he exists in the world, but he doesn't exist as part of this sequence. So to add him, we're going to add a new track, actor to sequencer, and I'm going to need to find him in here. If I had him selected, he would have been available at the top, but I don't have him selected, so I'm going to have to find him. There he is right there. Now that he's added, I can change his transform. I can change his animation. I'm going to go ahead and add an animation. He's going to start by doing his idle animation. But I'm not going to do his idle animation very long because I'm going to add a new animation track. And very quickly, I'm going to get him to do his drum solo. Right now, they're on top of each other at the same time as they're running. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to move his drum solo down so that it starts after 1.5 seconds of looking at him stand there idle. I'm going to grab the end of my idle animation, right? And I can actually move that backwards. So let me grab that if I can. Wow, it's off the screen, so I may have to move this over some more. Move him back. He has a very, very long idle. That's very interesting. And I'm going to move his idle to how long I want the overlap to be. And again, we're going to do the same thing where he's going to have this overlap between the two. So as we do the overlap, we're going to blend them together. To blend them together, I go to my animation. I add an animation keyframe for my weight. First, I got to move my read head, right? So step 1, move the read head where you want it to be. Step 2, we're going to set our keyframes. Move the read head. Set my keyframes. I can select these and change the values. So the drum solo animation down here is going to start at 0 and it grows to become 1. My idle animation starts at 1 and it will shrink to become 0. So now he will blend between the two and play his drum solo. Once again, as we're playing, we may want some things to happen, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to let him play his drum solo for a little bit, and I'm going to move the rock as he plays his drum solo. So one thing I noticed is that this cut scene, this segment is a little short. I'm not going to have much time for his drum solo to play before the rock starts moving. So I'm going to go ahead and animate beyond my edge, and then I'm going to go back to my main track and we will move it quite a bit. So now that we've got this set up, I've got my camera cuts, my actor, Narbash. My rock is not in my sequencer. So we're going to need to add another track, actor to sequencer. I'm going to need to find my rock in here. There is SM Rock. SM Rock is going to start his keyframe at this position. So I'm going to add my keyframe at this point. And then I will move ahead 1 second. And 1 second later, the rock will have moved. So I'm going to select my rock. Right? I will need to move my rock to a new location where the rock is going to be. And so let's just slide it this way. And add my keyframe again. So now we'll get a view of the rock moving. But we'll notice that my animation doesn't go far enough, so I need to go back to my master scene, and I'm going to need to expand my master scene to include my cool rock movement section. So let's move that over a bit. And again, I can zoom out, right click and move over so that I can make this larger. And we can move this section to where we want this to be. So now back in our first cutscene, our cutscene should go all the way to here, which is just him rocking out as it moves over. I'm going to go back into this, and just for fun, let's do a little more changes after the rock moves a bit. Right, we're going to be able to extend this all the way over. After the rock moves a bit, I'm going to change my focal point again. So select my Cine Camera actor. Here's my manual focus. Select this. I'm going to focus on him again. Add a key. We'll come back this way. When we enter, let me go ahead and go back to my first. When we enter, I'm going to want to head to focus on my buddy there. Add a keyframe. When he starts rocking, boom, boom, 2 hits. I'm going to change my focus again. Oops, I added the keyframe in the wrong spot, so let me go back. So let's go back to the beginning. So I'm going to go to the beginning. I'm going to change my focal distance to my buddy here. I'm going to add that keyframe. Then I'm going to move my read head, let him bounce twice. After he's hit twice, I'm going to change my focal depth. So I'm going to add a keyframe so that he doesn't change at that point, and then it will very quickly change over just a few to be my rock instead. So I click my eyedropper, I drop my rock, and I'll change my focus a little. All right, we should be able to give this a shot, see what it looks like. So I'm going to make sure I save everything. So File, I'm going to save all. I'm going to go to my first cutscene master where I've got my 2 shots, right? I'm going to start them at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and lock it to my viewport. And I'm going to change my viewport to the neat cinematic one that looks a little more cinematic. So I have a play button up here. And here's what it's going to look like as a cinematic. Oh, it looks like I didn't set the keyframe for my rock on my first object. So it looks like I've got some errors in that setup. So one of the things I'm going to need to do is go back to my first object. Sure enough, at the very beginning, right, as I start this actor, so let me turn off my cinematic camera, go back to my normal camera. We'll turn off that lock so that now we're in normal camera mode. And sure enough, as we first start, our rock object is already over at the new moved position. And that's because our rock isn't part of our first sequence, but our second sequence is going to actually move it to that new location. And so I want to make sure that when I go to my second sequence, my rock starts where I want it to start. So we're going to need to make sure that we go to the beginning of this sequence, that while my rock is there, right, that I have my rock keyframe at that first frame. So I'm going to make sure that when we start, my rock is set as in that position so that as we start, they're going to end up being there. It looks like I need to put my rock that way in my other cutscene as well, because I seem to have moved it in the world, and when I did, it didn't get saved in this cutscene. So yeah. So let's make sure that we add a track, actor to sequencer. I'm going to find that rock. I'm going to make sure my rock is in my starting position where I wanted it to be at the beginning. So we will move it back to where we wanted it. And we will add a keyframe. So I'm going to the front, add a keyframe. I'm going to the end and adding a keyframe. So now my rock is keyframed to stay there throughout this setup. So now we can go back, give it a test again, look for any bugs. You're going to keep doing this to kind of look for changes and any errors you might have. So once again, I'm going to change to my cool cinematic viewport. I'm going to lock my tracks here so that I can see it in cinematic mode. Move back to the very beginning, press play. Here's what it looks like. I kind of zoom in on him as he goes. Now we see him stand there. He gets ready. He plays his drum solo. Our rock moves out of the way. Our camera ended because we'll watch our camera cutscene. So if I open this again, we'll see that my camera actually stops running when we get to the end because here's my camera cuts. It doesn't make it all the way to the end. So if I want my camera cuts to keep working, I need my camera cuts to go all the way to the end. So I'm going to let that happen. Let me see where he gets his big boom there, right? So that's going to be at that point. All right, so now that we've got things kind of set up, if I press play in my game, we'll find that nothing's going to happen because we aren't set up with this cutscene to play, right? So this cutscene is created. It's ready to go. I can go back to my normal view. I can turn off my lock so I'm not locked to that view anymore. Go to the start. I can do a save all. Make sure everything's saved. But if I play my level, we're going to find that he's just standing there. It's not doing my cutscene, right? I'm going to want my cutscene to happen at a certain part of the game. One thing I can do is I can select my cutscene. Here's my cutscene master. And I can turn on autoplay. Autoplay means that as soon as I press play, it's going to run my cutscene. All right, and it auto-played the cutscene as soon as the level started, but that's not what I want. What I want is to be able to create a trigger that's going to activate our cutscene when we step into that trigger. So in our next video, we will take a look at creating a cutscene activating trigger and adding additional elements to our cutscene.